Our project today is to make a stencil out of our Huntsville Steamworks logo. I'm going to take the anvil and hammer and sparks and make a 2-layer stencil to put on the side of this toolbox. I chose this toolbox because it's got a really cool vantage point that can be seen from a lot of different angles in the shop. The materials for our project today are going to be iron lac spray paint. This is a high quality spray paint that we use for art projects, specifically designed for art projects. I'm going to show you 2 different ways how to cut out your stencil. One will be with a utility knife and a printout of the 2 different layers that you're going to be doing. The other way will be using a digital file and the Silhouette Cameo. That gets cut onto 12x12 cardstock. Other good things to have around are masking tape and a tape measure. So to use our Silhouette, you start with the adhesive mat. This will hold down your material. It's real sticky right here. We've got our 12x12 cardstock. What you want to do is line it up right here on the grid. So you just go from one corner to the other. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but the closer the better. Line it up so that it completely covers the entire grid. Then you use the arrow to load it into the machine. There's a couple little markers to mark where the mat should go. Arrows on both sides. Line it up as best you can. Hold it somewhat firmly, but loose at the same time so that it can take it into the machine. So now that we've used the vinyl cutter to cut out our two-layer stencil, I want to talk a little bit about hand cutting your own stencils, which is something you can do if you don't have access to a vinyl cutter. To do that, all you need is your actual image. So with a printout, you want to make sure that these are the same size because you want them to go together. It's nice if they're printed on the same type of paper so that when they're laid next to each other, you can line them up. And what you'll need is a utility knife to actually do the cutting and make your stencil. So while a vinyl cutter is going to be incredibly more precise than you could ever be by hand, having this ability to cut out your own stencils is a really valuable skill if you're going to be working with stencils in the future. I'm cutting on top of a piece of chipboard, which is just cardboard. I'm using it as a cutting mat. And you want to be real gentle. That is the reason we use cardstock with the vinyl cutter, is because it holds up much better and is much more resilient. Using printer paper can be frustrating because it is so flimsy and fragile. It can take a lot of practice to not tear your paper. But if you do, that can always be fixed as well. You can take a small bit of masking tape and fix little things like that. I don't know if you can see the little tear, and fix that right up. Because I just cut through my paper. Sometimes you got to do that. And there are our hand-cut stencils. So before you spray any stencils anywhere, you just want to prep your surface. This is a high gloss metal surface, so I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to hit it with a little bit of steel wool. I don't really want to sand it. I just kind of want to get some of the bigger particles off it and give it a little bit more adhesion when the spray paint comes on. And then I'm going to hit it with just a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. And again, just try to clean off any dirt, grime, anything, so we get a good adhesion from our spray paint. Now that we have our stencils, we've prepped our surface, it is time to apply. So the most important thing here is that we make sure that the 2 different layers are going to line up. And the way we're going to do that is by taping this down to our surface. And then once we have it taped down, we're going to mark the box and with the corners of our paper, and we're going to use those as our registration marks. That's how we're going to lay down the next layer of the stencil. So first things first, we want to grab a piece of tape. We're going to figure out exactly where we want to place it. I want it to be slightly forward because I know that when it's seen from the doorway, you want things to be this direction. If it's hidden too far back, it's not going to be as visible. And so I want it And luckily there's a big flat surface here, so I can actually just lay the paper right there and it's going to be very much straight, which is a nice surprise with our tape. Again, just a big liberal piece of tape on top. We want it forward. We want to make sure that we're not cutting off the end of our anvil. And tape in place. You can use as much or as little tape as you're comfortable with. The big thing at this point when you actually start spraying is that you don't overspray onto your actual box. You don't want paint out here, so you might want to get another piece of cardboard, another piece of paper, anything. You could even use our other layer to cover up the big sections so that we don't get a lot of paint as we're spraying. And then the other thing to think about is making sure that the stencil is laying flat. Once it's flat, you will be able to get a nice crisp line when you spray through it. And I'm just using some coffee stirrers to do that. I can hold down different parts. I can do all kinds of things, just holding down the sections where I'm working. If you were doing this on a flat vertical surface, or if it was laying flat on its back, then you could use weights. I use pennies a lot of times, things like that, to hold things down. Make sure that your paint is thoroughly mixed properly. And it's time to spray. When spraying paint through your stencil, you want to be pretty quick. You want to move pretty fast. You also want to press the nozzle very lightly. If you hold it as hard as you can, you're going to let too much paint out at one time and you'll end up with bleeding and you'll have uneven color and your stencil will not be crisp and clean. All right, so we've got our first layer. We let that dry for just a few minutes. Now it's nice and dry. Now we've got to lay out our next layer. So we've got our marks here, registration marks for where our paper should be. And if the vinyl cutter did its job, it centered those images exactly perfectly on the page. So this will be exactly where it needs to be, above the anvil. So we're just going to grab a little tape. Again, nice big strip. We're going to place it on the top and then line it up with our registration marks. That looks pretty good. We got blue lines where they need to be. I'm not going to use any more tape because it's really only right here. I can use my stirrers. I got my second color. Hold it down. And I can always do a test spray. And being gentle when you remove them. Got a little bit of smear right there. Sometimes that happens, but otherwise a pretty clean stencil. So that was our project, guys. That's how we use the Silhouette Cameo to turn our logo into a set of two-layer stencil for a finished product. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and please, if you have any suggestions for future videos or any of our equipment you'd like us to show off, please leave them in the comments. Thanks for coming by.